This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. Many of us challenged by many different things in life, and sometimes that can hold us back. Sometimes that can present a challenge in itself from just navigating life on a daily basis. Now add to that a chronic condition, and you have some real challenges, even a chronic condition like diabetes. We are going to talk with somebody today that has established a practice of mental health therapy for those with chronic conditions. So glad that she and her team help people with this, because I don't know anybody else doing it. Angela Espin is on the program once again. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm good and excited and gratified that we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive here, and it's going to open a lot of eyes, I believe, in terms of figuring this stuff out, why some of us develop chronic conditions and others do not, and more. I'm thinking that maybe we should start with your personal story. Last time we got together, we never really dug into that. We ran out of time, honestly.
Yeah.
How did this all begin for you? What's your journey to helping people here?
Sure. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 6 years old in 1979. So in 1979, we didn't have nearly the technology that we have today. So back then, we didn't do blood finger pokes. We had to pee in a cup and drop a tablet in and measure. It was like a science experiment. It was wild.
Wow.
So as time goes on, right, and in my journey, I struggled with that. My parents were divorced. I lived with my mom in Las Vegas for the school year, back with my dad in the summers, but they had split up before I got sick. So, and that'll be important a little bit later. So I grew up and had this thing, right? So I had this type 1 diabetes, of course, in the 80s as a Gen Xer, where a lot of emotional neglect, like, oh, just take your medicine, eat, do a good job. But I was living with all of this anxiety. So another compounding factor is I grew up in an alcoholic family, really. And so that was the tool that I picked up to deal with my stress and anxiety of living with this disease, because it's pervasive, it's chronic, it's invisible, and it goes unnoticed. We do tend to focus a lot more on type 2 diabetes because it's more prevalent, but type 1, when we get diagnosed younger. So anyway, as a teenager, I started drinking and partying with my friends, and I realized, hey, like, I don't think about being type 1 diabetic when I'm drinking and having fun with my friends. So that was my solution for everything, right? So on I went for my career of drinking, and then I get sober, and I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't mind breaking my anonymity. I'm fine with it. And I've been in the program now for 15 years. So as I was getting my life together and building back up, I decided to go to graduate school. And my first love really was looking into helping prison inmates with their dog training programs. So that was what I really wanted to look at and address, and I think it's phenomenal. That's another topic for another day. But I was doing some other research, and it dawned on me, I did all this work about acceptance, about the alcohol use disorder, recovering from that, acceptance, and it hit me that I had never, ever accepted that I had type 1 diabetes. It was something I fought against. I hated it. I did the bare minimum to take care of myself. It was a lot of self-neglect. I just did not care. I just did enough to stay alive. So it dawned on me, like, wow, what's going on here? So what I started doing was applying the same principles that I learned in the 12-step program into my daily management of my type 1 diabetes. So instead of, oh my gosh, I have a high blood sugar, I'm going to die soon, like, this is killing me, what am I, all that stress and anxiety, I learned, oh, I can live in the present. I can deal with this one day at a time, one glucose check at a time, one meal at a time. That kind of concept of letting go, letting God thing that they teach us in AA recovery. So it just really resonated with me, and I changed everything about how I viewed my diabetes and my illness. So rather than, oh, I checked my blood sugar, it's through the roof, and we label it, oh, I'm a bad diabetic, I'm not taking care of myself. And then I mentioned this last night, going to the doctors, and then the doctor saying, you're not doing good enough. You got to get this under control. So I'm hearing I'm just not doing a good job. So I kind of scratched all those old ideas and like, look, I'm doing the best I can on a day-to-day basis, and learn to accept it and looking at my diabetes instead of an enemy and a big monster to fight against. I reframed it as a little baby that I need to take care of and nurture and love. So that kind of shifted everything. So then I did deeper dives, and that changed my career path. And that's what led me here today. So I started doing more and more research on the mental health aspects of type 1 diabetes. And in the current medical model, we get diagnosed, we go to the doctor, the family gets all this education. There's a diabetes educator, there's a dietitian, there's all this medical, but there's no mental health therapist for anyone in the family. And it's very traumatic for the family too, especially the parents when their little baby is dying and they don't know, and then a whole lifestyle change. So there's a lot going on. But that mental health piece and the adjustment disorder piece is just not there. It's non-existent. They don't have a mental health professional on that diabetes education team. It's nurses and dietitians. So then we're led, okay, here's the panacea for everybody, the box that you need to fit in. It's all about control. And we think about this with a teenager. And this is why doctors are beating their heads against the wall, not knowing what to do. And they get very frustrated. I have a little story of a nurse that I know, and she was working with a patient who was about, I think, 12 or 13 in the hospital. And the doctor said, I hate working with type 1 diabetics. They're the worst. There's nothing they don't care about themselves. So we're talking little kids. And so the nurse.
Is this so, Angela, did the kids actually hear that statement?
I don't think so.
Oh, thank goodness.
I don't think so. I hope not. However, the nurse has a daughter who has type 1 diabetes. So the nurse that I know said to the doctor, oh, yeah, well, I'm going home to my type 1 here in a minute. So kind of told the doctor she was being inappropriate. So this is part of the thing. So kind of going back to the research, I was doing more and more digging. There was a study that came out of Europe some years ago, and they studied the morbidity of people who were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes earlier compared to later. So earlier was 12 and younger, later was 12 and older. They found that the people who were diagnosed 12 years old and older, that 39% of them died from substance use related disorders. Not died, 39%. So the kids that got diagnosed later, it's this huge trauma. And not unlike myself, they're dying from trying to cope with this by using alcohol, drugs, whatever. Self-harming behavior is a big one. Binging and purging, cutting, all those kinds of things. Again, going back, when you look at us, we look healthy, we look fine. There's nothing wrong with us. So it's easy to overlook. And then internally, there's so much going on. So that I found another study, and I pulled it out here just to kind of go over it. So I started thinking and digging more and going back to this acceptance piece and utilizing the 12 steps for type 1 diabetes or diabetes in general. And I'm like, why isn't there a 12-step? Why isn't there a Diabetics Anonymous? Where is it? And that's one things that I would really like because it saved my life. It really, in not just the substance use disorders, but also in practicing acceptance to take care and love myself. Right. So, so I started looking at the similarities between specifically alcohol use disorder and type 1 diabetes and kind of find out they act like the same exact disease. It is intense. It's wild. So I have my little handout and I'll go over some of them. So some of the physiological effects that happen, that they're both disorders when we ingest a substance. For me, for a type 1 diabetic, it's sugar, food. For someone with alcohol use disorder, it's alcohol. We don't metabolize the substance like people that don't have these disorders do, like healthy people. So there's also the phenomenon of craving. So for somebody suffering with alcoholism, they drink one, they want 12. With someone with type 1 diabetes, I might eat a snack and then that sends the blood sugar up, but that's telling my brain that I'm starving, which means I'm eating more.
Wow.
And the blood sugar goes up and up and up. But the body really is, in essence, starving because the insulin is what is the key that takes that glucose into the cells to produce energy, right? They're both invisible chronic medical conditions. Alcohol detox, the shakes, mimics almost the same exact feeling of a hypoglycemic event, a low blood sugar, shaky, sweaty, confused. I've heard story after story where people with type 1 diabetes, they'll go in a hypoglycemic low blood sugar event and get pulled over and get accused of being drunk and get charged with a DUI because it looks like someone who's intoxicated. And personality changes, things of that nature. Let's see what some of each can cause neuropsychological damage. They can both lead to early death. The person affected is not crazy about adhering to the treatment that's required. And then there's also the impact of the family dynamics. There's a lot of codependency that occurs. Not just in alcohol. That's why there's Al-Anon, right? I mean, so it is a family issue. And then it just even goes out even further into bigger systems, like the alcohol use disorder, other substance use disorders, and type 1 is a huge strain on the medical system. It's expensive. And especially for somebody that doesn't want to do it. So let's say, you have a teenager, they're rebelling against everything. They go into diabetic ketoacidosis, have to go to the hospital. They have the doctors that are frustrated because they're missing this mental health piece. They just think we're being non-compliant, that we're just doing it, that we hate ourselves, we don't want to do the deal. And again, it goes back to the labeling of you're a bad person, you're a bad diabetic because you don't follow my rules. Wow. And then we get labeled as non-compliant and it gets in the chart and it's a mess. So really, I think it really boils down to acceptance and teaching not just the person affected, but also the medical care providers, the family, how to deal with this in a more healthy way. I think people are getting better at it, especially as the generations continue, we're getting more in tune with emotional and mental health needs. But this population with type 1 diabetes is vastly overlooked because in number, we're very small compared to the rates of type 2 diabetes that's out there.
Wow. So many points that you bring up here, very powerful ones. The perception of those without it, I do believe, is that it's controllable. It's a hindrance. It's a challenge. I bet you're fine. The rest don't look at the psychological situation of what's going on and also what's going on within your body. Like you said, the sugar spikes and how that can psychologically affect somebody. Angela, what prompted you to want to look at the the connection, the parallels between somebody who's an alcoholic and somebody with type 1 diabetes. Where did that come up?
Well, that came up with me in my own recovery,
Wow.
right? Like I would have never discovered this had, and this is the whole like, why are we here kind of existential kind of thinking. But I really feel like my purpose of getting this and my journey developed, I came from an alcoholic family. That was the coping skill, and I picked it up and I got the gene and it worked until it stopped working. And then I got sober and could clear my mind and thinking more about overall general health, not just for myself, but for others. Um, it's it just goes under the radar. It just goes. I even tried to talk to my own doctor about this and say, "Hey, this is," and he dismissed me and said, "Oh, we'll just put you on our preferred providers list. Like, thanks, but no
Mm.
thanks."
Just what you said, I was thinking the same thing. That, if you want to believe in the way the universe works, that you needed to be exposed to this, the alcohol side, the diabetes side, so that you could help others and see these parallels. And we talked before we jumped on here how childhood traumas in your life can create dis-ease along the way. Can we dig into that for a moment?
Sure. Yeah, there is more and more research that's coming out because trying to figure out what causes type 1 diabetes has always been a very pervasive, big question mark.
Mm.
But I've seen a couple of studies that is showing that exposure to trauma, having adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress can be a contributing factor to the development of type 1 diabetes.
I hear
We
you.
don't know for sure. There's no rhyme or reason, but there is data that suggests that these stressors that happen, whether it's sexual trauma, a divorce, physical abuse, being raised by a narcissistic, abusive parent, all these, or a parent going to prison, all these adverse things, what happens is it increases that stress hormone, which is cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
The cortisol, it makes the blood sugar, tells the liver, hey, you got to fight, flight, freeze. So there can be a push of glucose in the system from the liver telling the child it's time to fight. So the increase in cortisol tells the liver, hey, this kid needs a shot of glucose to be prepared to run. But then the body starts to sees that as an enemy and overdoes it. So it'll start attacking the beta cells in the pig to say, oh, here's all this insulin, and kind of view it as an enemy, so to speak, and start to turn. So then it'll turn on the body, and that's when the body starts to attack the beta cells in the pancreas, causing it to destruct.
My gosh.
So when I was reading all this, I'm thinking, what was my trauma? What was my trauma? And there's a couple of things, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not God, so I don't know what the whys and hows, but my mom I was 2 weeks late. I was overcooked by 2 weeks. And so there's some evidence too that could have been a contributing factor. When my parents split, my dad left for a year, God rest his soul. He went on a cruise ship to deal poker and live his best single life. But there's some abandonment issues there too. So I was going through this, my parents' divorce, my dad leaving the family, and then my brothers and I got sick one winter. And so I think that might have been kind of the trigger, because they got well and I didn't. So it could have been kind of a blend of all of those things together, where my body was just like, oh, this is a lot of stress. And then getting sick with the flu, and then my immune system just went into overdrive.
Yes, and this just happened to me. Just what you're saying. I had some virus last fall. I haven't had a fever in half my life. It wasn't COVID, and I was in bed for 4 days, had a fever, and I knew where I got it from. As a coworker was coughing, And he said, oh, it's an allergy. And the reason I'm bringing this up is it changed a lot within me. My ferritin levels spiked. That's your iron stores. And I would just scratch something on my neck. And I'm like, what's that? Nothing. It turned into cancer. It was a tumor. It was mid-level skin cancer. I've dealt with the lower levels, all my 25 years, whatever. This was mid-level. It grew in 10 weeks. And, I said it to the doctors and they're like, I don't really know if it's connected to that virus. Now they're saying, yeah, your immune system was, whacked out. They even told me it was stage 3.
It sounds like you're describing
Stage 3.
And
I was like, what?
Wow.
How could that? And they made a mistake, and it's just some surgery and all good. But I bring that up because, like you're saying, the immune system goes kind of crazy. And I believe in everything that you're saying, based on research, studying, and podcasts too, and not even just for diabetes. I think the traumas that we suffered as children, and we all did in different shapes and forms, have something to do potentially with the disease, because now that trauma causes you as an adult to look at things in a different way. You're always in a state of conflict. You're always stressed out. And more research suggests that all of this stuff is into the cellular level. Mm-hmm. Anything we deal with, any stress, it's not just, my stomach's bothering me. I feel jittery. No, every cell in your body is dealing
Absolutely. With it. It changes our DNA. Trauma and the stress or adverse events, which we can't escape. That's part of just being a human. We all, just as human, we lose loved ones, for instance. It's just part of life. And then some things are within reason and some things are not. So we call those the big T traumas and lowercase t traumas.
Yep.
And I do think we are better, especially for us Gen Xers growing up in the 80s and early 90s, where it's like the whole be seen and not heard and emotional neglect kind of thing. But I see it more and more in my practice. There's a friend of mine, her daughter they're trying to get to a diagnosis of POTS. And it turns out when we were talking about it, she had a lot of childhood trauma. Not that anything her parents did, but her dad was in an accident at work and lost his foot rather.
Sure.
So that created this whole chaos within the family system. And so it touches everything and everyone.
Absolutely.
And like you said, in a cellular DNA level. So in that situation, then we pass it on to our offspring. So like my mom, she had her trauma and her mom had her trauma. But it gets passed down, not just genetically, but also how we learn to cope and deal with those stressors, aka alcoholism or drug use or just being abusive. It's interesting to me. A lot of times people who suffer trauma become the abuser themselves. So there is a lot to it. But
well, like they say, those who are hurt others.
Yeah, hurt people.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's I think it's Maya Angelou who said that. So, and I'm glad that we're getting better. I feel like this generation who's now having little ones are a lot better at acknowledging that emotional piece. Now, if we can get the doctors and nurses on board, because they unknowingly and unintentionally create more trauma for us. And then they wonder why we become non-compliant. It's really avoidance. It's avoiding of the stressor of more trauma coming at us. We're sitting here with a disease. We didn't ask. No type 1 or somebody with substance use disorder asks for it. I don't know one recovering addict or alcoholic who says that woke up and said, you know what, this is something I want for my life.
Sure.
So it just evolves that way. And then everybody deals with it in their own manner. So there is a lot of more knowledge. It's just getting, I think, the medical practitioners to buy into it more.
I believe, Angela, they're programmed to do what they do. And what do? take care of the symptoms. You've got, on average, 11 minutes in the doctor's office. That's the hello and goodbye and insurance potential check. And that's it. That's it. Here's some pills. There you go. But where did some of the trauma come from? Feeling like you're not being heard. And now you go to a doctor. You're not being heard because you're trying to tell them, no, I can't deal with this. It's not just the diabetes. It's the stress involved in it. It's the feelings that I have. And you might not even know where the feelings are coming from. And that could be from the trauma that you had in your childhood. And you haven't even processed that. But I believe that's where you come in helping people with therapy connected to chronic conditions. You can do this virtually, correct?
Yes.
Helping people? Yeah. How do we find you? What's the best way?
So there's several ways. Our website is www.chronichealthnc for North Carolina.com. I can be reached directly at 704-517-2106. And then my email address is angela@chronichealthnc.com. And anyone can reach out to me. I love talking about this and educating and exploring. I do not know it all. There is more, so much more to it. And this is type 1 diabetes specific. So, and I could talk about this all ad nauseum. So there's just a lot of layers to it, and we're just now getting to scratching the surface.
Sure. Well, you've opened my eyes up to a lot. If you didn't validate things for me, you've opened my eyes up to a lot of this, how the trauma, and I've done lots of podcasts on it, how it can really lead to disease and the chronic illness that we're dealing with. This is the starting point, awareness right here. Yeah. Angela, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being here.
Likewise. And I'm looking forward next time we get together. It's very impactful, and this affects all of us. All of us. You know, if you think you know somebody with a chronic illness, if it's not you, you know somebody who is dealing with that and so much more. We'll talk next time. Thanks again.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.